Welcome back to another one of my videos. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Lotta, and today I'm going to show you how to make this delicious looking raspberry mango cake. Now this cake is made with a vanilla sponge that is layered with a raspberry buttercream as well as a mango fruit insert. So if you want to see how I made this cake, keep watching the video. Now for our mango fruit insert, you're going to need 500 grams of frozen and thawed mangoes, 20 grams of sugar, the juice of half a lemon, 9 grams or 1 package of gelatin, and about 100 milliliters of water just for our gelatin so we can let that bloom. Now essentially all we're going to do is let our gelatin bloom with our water, and we're going to go ahead and add the rest of our ingredients into a bowl or blender, and we're going to blend that up until we have a nice smooth consistency. Now basically all that's left to do is bring our fruit puree up to a boil so that it reduces just a little bit before we turn the heat off and gently whisk in our bloomed gelatin. While we wait for our mango puree to cool down just a little bit before we add our gelatin, we can go ahead and prep our molds. Now there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. You can use plates, bowls, baking tins, etc., etc. You basically just want to make sure that the shape that you use is slightly smaller than the size of your cake. Now I'm going to make 3 layers, so they're not going to be super thick and they're not going to be super thin. If you want to make 4 fruit layers, they're going to be a little bit thinner, and if you just want to make 2, they're going to be a little bit thicker, but that's pretty obvious. Now it doesn't matter what you end up using as your mold. You want to make sure that your fruit layer doesn't stick to it so that you can transfer it to your cake. So to do that, we're just going to cover it in plastic wrap. So I'm just going to take a sheet of my plastic wrap, cover my plate. That way it's not going to stick to the plate and I can easily just flip it right onto my cake when I'm layering it. Now the last thing we need to do is evenly distribute our fruit puree into our 3 molds. Now you can either throw these into the freezer for about 30 minutes to let them set, or you can put them into the fridge for 1 to 2 hours. Regardless of what you do, you just want to make sure that they are completely set before you layer your cake. Now the first thing we need to make is our sponge cake so we can get that cooled off. So once again, we're going to use 4 room temperature eggs, 125 grams of sugar with 1 package of vanilla sugar, 1 pinch of salt, 125 grams of flour, and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Once again, I do have a step-by-step video on my channel on how I make my sponge cake. If you want to see that, it's going to be linked right up there. But essentially all we're going to do is whisk together our eggs, sugar, vanilla, and salt until that's super light and fluffy for about 15 minutes or so. And in the meantime, we can already sieve together our 2 dry ingredients. Now that our eggs are super fluffy like this, we can move on. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and sieve over my dry ingredients one more time. That way it's just super light and fluffy and it's not weighing down our egg mixture. Our sponge cake can wander into the oven that's been preheated to 180 degrees Celsius or 360 degrees Fahrenheit for about 25 to 30 minutes. Now while our sponge cake is baking, we can already go ahead and prep our German buttercream. Now for this cake, I'm going to be using a batch and a half of my German buttercream recipe. That's just because I want to make sure that I have enough buttercream left over after layering to properly decorate my cake. That being said, for the batch and a half of our buttercream, you're going to need 375 grams of softened or room temperature butter, and then 1.5 packages of pudding. Now once again, I always prepare my pudding with 200 milliliters of cream and 300 milliliters of milk instead of just 500 milliliters of milk per package. Now as per usual, when we make our German buttercream, we're just going to go ahead and whisk up our butter until it gets nice and light and fluffy. And in the meantime, we can sieve our pudding to make sure that any lumps or clumps or really anything that's in our pudding gets smoothed out. And in the end, that's going to just help get a really nice smooth buttercream, which is obviously the goal. At this point, we can go ahead and add a dollop of our pudding at a time until everything is nice and incorporated. Now that our base buttercream recipe is done, we're going to go ahead and divide that in half, and into 1/2 we're going to add our raspberry filling. Now for the raspberry buttercream, you're going to need 200 grams of frozen raspberries and 1 small splash of water. Now essentially all we're going to do is add this into a pot and bring it up to a boil until everything's nice and reduced, and then we're just going to go ahead and strain it to get all of our raspberry seeds out. Now that we've sieved out all the seeds, we can bring it back up to a boil and let it reduce even more. Now at this point, you want to make sure to let your raspberry mixture cool off before you add it to your buttercream. Now at this point we can get to layering. So I already went ahead and cut my sponge dough into 4 even-ish layers. I also have my 3 frozen mango layers, our raspberry buttercream, and I transferred a part of my regular buttercream into a piping bag with just a plain tip. Now to layer, we're simply going to take 1 layer of our sponge and then pipe 1 border of our white buttercream along the edge. That way none of our fillings are going to squeeze out the sides, and we're going to have a nice white buttercream on the outside. After we pipe the border, we're going to fill it with our raspberry buttercream and then 1 layer of our frozen mango fruit insert. And then we just repeat that 2 more times. So I did a really quick crumb coat. So at this point, I'm going to put my cake into the fridge for about an hour just to let it set. And then it's going to be a lot easier to get a nice, smooth, finished buttercream. Now that our cake is nice and chilled, we can go ahead and do our top layer of our buttercream. I'm just going to be using the remainder of the white buttercream, and on the sides, I'm going to be using this weird spatula thing that has the little stripe effect on it, and that's just going to allow us to get some really cool stripes on the side of our cake. At this point, our cake needs to chill for at least another hour to let the buttercream completely set before we fill in the gaps with our orangey yellow buttercream. Now, while I was waiting for the cake to chill, I already went ahead and took a part of my leftover white buttercream and colored it with this beautiful yellow orangey food coloring. Now you can pick any color that you want. I'm going to go with this orangey yellow because I think it'll go with the mango vibe. But again, you can do whatever you want to do. Now to make the next step a little bit less messy, I'm going to transfer some of my orange buttercream into a piping bag with just a small round tip. And that's just going to make it a little less messy to get those stripes, and hopefully there's not going to be orange buttercream flying around everywhere. As you can tell, my cake is super chilled. My buttercream is not budging and it's not sticking to my finger. This is how you want it to be. If your buttercream is too smooth, you're basically just gonna mish your two colors together and it's not gonna have these really beautiful stripes. That being said, I'm gonna go ahead and pipe on my orange buttercream in between my layers, and then I'm just going to use my spatula tool, whatever this is, to smooth it out. Now to make sure that you get it super nice and smooth, it also helps to heat this up, and that's going to slowly heat up your buttercream as you take it off. Now I already went ahead and transferred my cake onto my serving plate. So from here on, we can get to doing our final little decorations and our final touches. Now I decided I wanted to go for a little bit of a vintage piping style again to decorate this cake. So I just transferred the leftover buttercream into 2 piping bags. For my white one, I used a smaller, just plain piping tip. And then for the leftover orangey yellow buttercream, I'm using a slightly bigger tip that has like the little spikes on it. Once again, you can decorate this however you want. I think I'm going to do something slightly similar to the vintage cake that's already on my channel. So I'm going to start with my bigger tip and then go into my smaller tip. And maybe if I feel like it, I'll use some of my leftover raspberry buttercream to do a couple highlights as well. I don't know yet. We'll just see how it turns out. And there you go, our mango raspberry cake. So that's going to be everything for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, you can give it a thumbs up or write me a comment down below. And as always, the whole recipe is going to be in the description box as well.